It is time to talk about the second album now from Conjurer. Páthos is what it's called. It might not be a comeback album after 13 years, but in the T&M sphere, this might be one of the most anticipated albums of the last couple of years. 4 years since the debut album Maya, which blew everyone away. And we have spent a lot of that time since then theorizing, wondering what kind of direction Conjurer might take their music in.
Yeah, no, like Maya was like an album that for the UK really put Conjurer on the map, and it was kind of like, I remember when it came out, and you had a couple of people were kind of resistant to it almost, and then you can still going to go, no, you know what, this is a band who are totally like worthy of like the way people are blowing up at them. So it was like really exciting, and it feels like, say, it's been a long time since Maya at this point, so there was a lot of time to kind of wonder why is the record taking time, what are they developing and growing, and how is it going to come out?
Sam, if I was to say to you that Maya is a modern classic in terms of like how it has sat with people in the heavy scene over the last few years, would you in any way disagree?
I wouldn't argue against it. Like, I mean, it is quite an underground one in that way. But in terms of like, I don't know anyone I know who's ever listened to it doesn't have a bad word to say against it. Like,
I mean, it was shockingly not underground. I mean, it was underground, but it got shockingly close to not being, which I think is going to be a major conversation point with this, because the success of Conjurer in the wake of Maya has been pretty incredible, and you know, I think kind of difficult to actually get a handle on in a way, because you know they landed a record that first made everyone here go whoa, and it easily promoted them to one of, if not the leading metal band in this country of their kind of generation, and then over the following couple of years, through repeated touring and such, and word of mouth, they actually started to make a bit of a dent in something that many of our homegrown bands have not been able to do, and they built up some level of kind of reputability overseas and in the US. I think the jump from, you know, very, very good EP into outstanding album that had so many ideas, crossed, you know, so many streams in kind of fresh and inventive ways. And I think crucially, it had fucking songs where, like, it's so rare that you get something that's remotely relatable to, you know, sludge or post-metal or prog metal, whatever you want to call what Conjurer do, which in a way is part of the appeal of them itself. But something like that has so many, like, fuck yeah live moments. You know what I mean? Like when Wretch drop,
or
the riff in Hollow, or the one for me was always the bass slide in Hadal when it just fucking rocks at the end. Like shit like that like cemented themselves in people's heads. And the songwriting on that is just so stellar, and I think that's what's made it stand so tall above so many of its peers. They, you know, songs are incredible, deserved all the plaudits in the world. I think Conjurer kind of fooled people into thinking they were bigger, or at least aiming bigger, than they actually are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean with that, because they've gone... This is a dark, bleak, miserable album, and like, when you're a band who are kind of like looking like, oh, they're going to be one of the metal bands to really graduate in the UK, you think, let's go write a big album that we're playing the main stage at Download Pilot and things like that. Like, let's embrace that, and they kind of haven't. Like,
well, yeah, because incredible band getting success, that's good, and that's what we fight for. That's what we try and, you know, push out there into the world. But even in like that kind of UK scene that they've come from, if you put them next to like Palm Reader or Svalbard, these kind of bands that they, you know, often share bills with, Conjurer are like the misanthropic, screaming, crying, throwing up heavy one, and something like that getting so buzzy and so popular was a real surprise in 2018. And in fairness, you would have said something about like that about, you know, Mastodon circa kind of 2004, perhaps, because like that band, Conjurer, they found a new way to make this kind of music, if you want to call them post metal, whatever, that could be so formulaic, and Conjurer wasn't. Like, it was doomy, but it had enough, you know, immediacy to it. Like, you had all these fucking, you know, Converge isms in there.
Well, actually, you had hardcore in there.
Yeah, like it meant that they could play with, you know, more metalcore leaning bands like ETS or whatever.
I mean, my favorite thing is the two times I've seen Conjurer live was supporting Nervous and Milk Tea.
Yeah, like, you would never put fucking, you know, you wouldn't put Old Man Gloom on with Milk Teeth. But
No.
Conjurer somehow wormed their way in there, and they took a kind of formulaic world of music at times, and they rearranged things in such a way that made it feel new and fresh. But this is a band that you must remember, they started off, they told me that their biggest influence was a tiny US band called Armed for Apocalypse, and that they were inspired to really be a band by Yob. And, these kind of bands that you're not seeing those bands play main stage download. If that's what, the way the world is right now, if any metal band or rock band really gets an inkling of success, people will jump to like, oh my God, they are the next big thing. But like, I think that the bands that Conjurer are modelling themselves after aren't those bands. That
they are
do
underground
those
bands, like, yeah.
And I think, just to bring this into Páthos and the kind of record they've made, in Maya, between all of those, fuck yeah, headbang kind of moments, there was also a real stark, kind of emotionally harrowing kind of side to it as well, with these really stark elements kind of laced throughout it. There was a new song that they were doing live for ages that seems to really suggest that the music was going to be taken in a more kind of progressive and difficult direction, and that is where you go when they were doing that on stage at Download Pilot, and a crowd of people there being like, what is this? Like, I think it was It Dwells, which amazingly might not be my least favourite song on this album, but this album, I think it sits with a handful of records by bands who have, whether they did it intentionally or not, have made moves into more difficult and underground territory from where they were before. New Bermuda by Deaf Heaven, the last Paul Barrett album, which a lot of people seem to have forgotten about for this reason, but is right heavy. Maybe Sulphur English by Interama, it will be another one as well. I think it might take a while to actually see where this record lands for people, I guess, because right now I think there are going to be a lot of people who thought they were all in on Conjurer, who are now going to be dealing with a more uncompromising, spiky and prickly record than they were perhaps prepared for.
I still feel like I've got a lot more to gain from this record. I mean, sure, I think this album was great. I do think this album is really good, but I was taken aback by how bleak and just upsetting this album can kind of be. It's not nice. It's like I said, Maya was dark and emotionally harrowing at points, but had those kind of moments of punch the air excitement in there. You don't really get that on here. The closest you'll get is Suffer Alone, which is the sort of 3-minute hardcore track. But other than that, this is a really personal kind of album that dwells on a lot of really hard things. What song? All You Will Remember is so upsetting and bleak and really harrowing. And that's the vibe of the record.
This record is crushing, and it is sludge was something that you could call Conjurer before, and you could call a major pillar of their sound, but it feels like they are upping even more the kind of primitive man end of their sound, the snuff out all waterboard you with sewage fucking heaviness, and these swinging sludge riffs on this are cataclysmic. And I don't want to say that it doesn't have fucking incredible satisfying moments, because it does. I kind of wish they hadn't gone to Will Putney, because his every fucking sound combusts your speakers approach, I think it gets a little bit homogenous in the scene right now, and they've gone to make it a harder, more violent, ugly sound that every time the double bass goes fast on this, it's kind of hilarious in how each of the pedal hits in such quick succession through that kind of Putney tone, it sounds like standing next to a plane propeller or something, or having it's mental.
Yeah, I get what you mean by that. The production of the sound is just make everything sound as heavy as possible at all times.
Rock has the grossness and dissonance of that. Just fucking rub your face in it, smell that, you know what I mean? But and getting nastier and nastier as it goes along until it reaches a point where it feels like they're almost quoting possibly what is probably the heaviest metal riff of the last 5 years, which is the end of Citadel by Interama, when that double bass comes in and the guttural goes over that, but with more fucking pick scrapes and breakdowns.
The pick scrapes on that breakdown,
they're trying to make it more horrible.
yeah, like I said, like as much as it is big, like you get most out of them, so like, oh, that is just unbelievably hard. But it is again in a way that just sounds crushing and like it is trying to actually cave in your skull.
It feels like they've pushed the vocals way more harrowing in both directions, where like Dan and Brady are fucking popping off on this. Like Dan's guttural is he's becoming one of those vocalists where like his growl is almost cartoonishly inhuman. Like how he summons that deep bellow out of him, I do not know. And then Brady is becoming more and more like piercing and intense.
Like really uncomfortable and like shrill and horrible at times. Like when you get moments where they are fully trading off each other, like it is overwhelming.
Yeah, there's a couple moments when he reminds me of the guy from The Body who famously screams so shrill that he sounds like a kettle coming to boil. And we're closing in both directions on some of these like real extremes. I think what marks it out as still being super fucking fresh and not just like another nasty sludge record for the pile, which we have many of, is this band can build and develop and colour a song so fucking beautifully. And this record doesn't feel like I love Conjurer sometimes because they can feel like giddy teenage metalheads challenging each other to write dirtier and dirtier riffs and laughing at how sick they are. And it means that there's a fun that, 99% of bands on an Arctangent bill don't have. But the complete opposite of that, it's interesting how Conjurer in their identity almost straddle those two things, because that's not all they are. And the darkness of this record feels like it's taken after those like harshest bits of Maya in really, it's expressing something and it's properly emoting. Like you say, all you will remember is properly affecting and moving in a way that this kind of crushing music can be if taken to the right places.
Yeah, it's like that ending part of all you remember where it's like, I promise I won't forget you, and then the line gets sort of like loses the word each time they repeat it, and it, because obviously like this song, like if you're going to use this about dementia and kind of like dealing with a loved one having that, and how that, like what a horrible thing that can be, and it really hits a personal touch, and when with their vocals like sounding so pained, both like even with like the gut voice, it sounds like someone who is like pouring out everything they've got. It really does affect you.
Yeah, and as a composition, I think that song is wonderful, where the slow pouring on of more delicate ideas, like there's a guitar lead that comes in almost exactly halfway through it, and it accompanies the kind of clean vocal part, and it's such like the melody is so simple, but it's so honest and so human in that just ringing out like that with that vocal, and that's before the full explosion into like
it's the spoken word bit into that final explosion.
Yeah, well, like the blast beat melodic black metal territory, which kills, and then they kind of they can anchor like essentially an entire song on that kind of feeling, like Those Years Condemned, which is another of my favorite moments on the record, where the intro almost feels like that kind of emotional post-hardcore like Envy or something, and then the way that those strings, they weep, and you can feel the song gearing up to open the fucking floodgates, raring to go, and when it does, done deal. It's majestic.
Yeah, like so those Years Condemned, like that has that like that black metal touch, which is just not used. It's used quite sparingly in this record, but it's used really effectively. And again, like that's something where you have the trade off of Brady and Dan, like, and it's so effective on that track, like really making that moment sound like so much more intense and like overwhelming, but really like engaging.
Yeah, like I don't want to make out this record is all like extremely mean horribleness, because like It Dwells is a really scary song, but there are like little glimpses just for a moment of kind of prettiness in it, and I think there's variety in there in terms of like when that transition from It Dwells into Rot, the sheer like nervous uneasiness of that first minute or so of that song, where it's just glowering, but you often do have these kind of really fluid segues between songs, and something like Basilisk can feel like it's kind of really dreamy and kind of transportative, like against the sheer heaviness in a way that kind of brings out a lot of tension and intrigue in terms of where the song is going.
Well, I mean, a lot of the songs do kind of start really soft and quiet, and like either build gradually into it or have a minute before it kind of all explodes, but they do. Like they have like a dynamic and like let things sit when they need to, so it's not all crushing all the time, and that allows you to kind of again like catch those little moments of beauty in there. So it like I say, it does have a dynamic sound where it's not all on one level, which keeps it from ever getting too like suffocating, I guess.
Yeah, and they use the clean vocals very sparingly, where I love them, and I would love to see more of them. I thought that about Maya on I think Thankless. I think is the one that has the enormous incredible clean vocal part. But at the same time, I don't want to see it become obvious trope, clean vocal goes here in the song thing, which is absolutely not what it is right now. And instead, they almost surprise you when they come in, and they kind of sound different on every song because there's that big lift on All You Will Remember.
Yeah, that first bit of the cleans is wonderful.
But then In Your Wake, there's that on familiar ground kind of group vocal. It's literally one line of the whole song that does has melodic singing, and the approach of that vocal feels very different in feel to All You Will Remember. So they do kind of the identity of the vocal approach almost feels different from song to song, and I think that translates into, again, when they do the clean parts and stuff, they're not formulaic. There's not a uniform sound between when they do those parts, like we were talking about again, Basilisk and Rot and stuff. I think the start of Cracks in the Pyre, there's that kind of dusty, woozy, beaten into the ground thing, and there's a whole other thing there in line with bands like Ahab and stuff like that recalls to me that they can go down that path, and they can bring even more emotional color to what you're doing. And these songs are dense as hell, but the more you get into them, the more meticulous you realize the construction of them is.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's why I want to spend more time on this record, because again, this has been a very dense kind of packed in album thing. So trying to balance between a lot of these records that are quite complex and things. So there's definitely more to give from this, but I mean, Cracks in the Pyre as a closer is just stunning, and it begins with that soft open with the whispered vocals before that roar just comes back in, and it's so powerful, and when you get on that, the kind of all just washes over you at the end, and the way it builds is such a epic and evocative way to close the record. But yeah, it's When I say a lot of the songs begin quiet, it's not kind of just well, we're doing the quiet bit and now we've got to do the loud bit, or we've got to stick the clean vocals in. Everything feels placed very carefully where it will make the most impact.
Yeah, even Suffer Alone, it stands out naturally because just like Wretch did on Maya, it's the super short immediate one, but it's more kind of sickly and queasy than Wretch was. Wretch just made you want to jump on heads, but there's something about that churning riff on Suffer Alone that just feels kind of a bit wrong, and in that way a bit more in line with the rest of what this record is doing.
I think that's it. Is they're taking that kind of short burst of kind of more hardcore track, but they're making it fit with the more oppressive darkness of this record, and as a result, it is a nice kind of jolt back in, coming sort of in the late album where things have been quite drawn out and wearisome. This kind of jolts you back in before it lets you again go into these last couple of songs.
Yeah, I don't know if they want to again avoid that being a trope that on every album we've got our short little hardcore song or whatever, but I do think it works as a great, considering what you were just saying about a lot of the songs kind of starting quiet and then building into something heavier. There's a great almost reset point about a song like that immediately it snaps you out of that kind of routine and makes you go, oh fuck, okay.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's I did kind of I was noticing it was they're doing that, and then Suffer Alone just comes in. I was like, cool, okay, so now it's just all go and
like I said, those clean intros and stuff, they do sound different. No. Again, I'm not trying to. I wasn't trying to say that's a formulaic, generic thing they do. It's just it is a way they build a lot of these songs, and it does work. It's just there is more in this album that I want to hear. There's more in Maya still that I want to hear from them. There's more still yet untapped that I want to hear for them. I agree. Sitting with this album for a while, it has been out for a couple of weeks. We had it before that. I'm glad that we've had that time because the songs didn't hit me first the way that Maya's do, and they're bathing in so much of this horrid muck that it takes more dedication with this album to let that kind of cling to you. But now I am my claw is extended for all the riffs that will crush live. But I'm very transported by the wider whole, as a sludge record kind of stewing in misery and hatred and sorrow. It's a fucking beauty, but it has these progressive instincts that very elevate that. Like, again, I tout bands like Primitive Man and such for kind of sheer horror, but they don't have the dexterity and the kind of dynamic songwriting instincts to take those nightmare songs to the places that these ones go. I think you've just got to feel the need to say, not necessarily going to get dramatically bigger on this record.
I mean, it'd be cool if people did go with this record, and
I think
their growth
the
did
one
continue.
point where that is true is if the word of mouth just continues on how fucking quality this is.
Yeah, like, but that's it. And I think, like, I admire that they wanted to kind of stick true to actually what their core sound was, rather than kind of like pivot to react to the success they had on Maya. But it's like I say, they are still incredible songwriters. They're still writing great songs, and hopefully that word of mouth and people will not kind of like be like, oh, this isn't what Maya Part 2 or what I wanted. And yeah,
I think this band, I guess this record feels like it's hammered home to me that this band are much more interested in the Yob or Neurosis or Converge model, where Mastodon are like the one band from that model to have like broken out into being something massive, you know? Like, that's an outlier, but that kind of uncompromising underground career, those are the bands that they are, again, that model is what they want to follow. And I think, considering this is, you know, just album 2 of that trajectory, you look at, like, you know, what bands in the UK are making kind of accomplished, multifaceted records like this. Really only Rolo Tomasi in this kind of lane.
Yeah, like Palm Reader again, but they're kind of a bit more melodic and different lane. But like of that kind of artistic, heavy music thing, there aren't many bands who are on this level.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that those who find it through, you know, that darkness will be well rewarded for doing so.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, like I'm making my way through it. It's taken a couple more listens than I initially would have expected, but it is a really rewarding record in that way.
Yeah, I don't want to say it. I got slightly tired of seeing It Dwells live before I knew it. Like, I saw it about 3 times, and I could never quite get a handle on it. But now I've listened to it here enough times, and the rest of these songs that now I'm like, yeah, fucking throw them at me in the live environment. I'm ready to fucking go and see Conjurer again. Pathos. Do let us know if you are, you know, one of the Conjurer faithful, what you think of it, because I think it is. It's going to take a slight bit of acclimatizing, but there's some fascinating, rewarding shit inside it.